don't know, I always kind of like the unusual stuff. But, well, for me, growing up with my family, and I think all of us with our families, it kind of affects, it does affect the way that we interpret the world and the way that we go out and we interact with the world. For me, one thing growing up, I always, even though they kind of expressed it maybe a little differently than a lot of families do, I always felt, I knew that my family loved me. I had unconditional love for my family. And when I think about when I left home and went out into the world and started, going to school and what I decided I wanted to do with my life, the reason that I was able to do the things that I did had nothing to do with the fact that I don't think any smart or had any kind of special skill sets. I think the most valuable thing that I had was I didn't have any fear of the world whatsoever, because I knew at any point if I fell flat on my face, I could always go home. And my parents wouldn't look at me any differently. They'd take me in a heartbeat, and I could stay as long as I wanted to, and they would love me unconditionally. And when I had that as kind of my base, there was really nothing in the world that I thought of that I couldn't go out and do. I didn't have any fear about going out and trying to do big things. And it happened once. I fell flat on my face when I was young, and my wife left me one time when I was really young, and they had to come get me and take me home, but they did. So that enabled me to do things in life that I wouldn't have been able to do. But they also affected me in other ways too. For example, my perception of God. Now, and I've talked about my parents before in here. They both accepted Christ this past Thanksgiving. But we grew up going to church every Sunday. That we were Methodist. My parents both sang then and still sing in the choir every Sunday. But when I thought about this week, after we would leave church service, the only thing they would ever talk about was whether or not the song went well. Was everybody on key, or, this person didn't come in at the right time, and they were upset about that because they practiced really hard about it. I never once heard my parents talk about a sermon whatsoever. My father, whenever he would say prayers before dinner, which is, you had to say prayer before dinner, it was the exact same prayer for 18 years. I could say it verbatim. The exact same prayer every single time. I never once heard my parents talk about God with their friends, even their church friends. Never heard a single God discussion about where they were at with God or what the relationship looked like. I never heard my parents talk to each other about God. Never mentioned it. When they made decisions, I never heard any references to, seeking God's will and making those decisions. So by the time I graduated high school and I went out into the world, and really the church that I grew up in 18 years, I never saw a single person come to Christ. To be honest with you, I didn't even know what that was. I was just the same people that showed up every Sunday. If you were to ask me what a Christian was at that point, I would say, a Christian is somebody who goes to church on Sunday and reads their Bible. I really had no conception of even what it meant to give your life to Christ. So not surprisingly, whenever I left home, I had no use for that type of Christianity. And still to this day, I have no use for that type of Christianity. So whenever I left home and I started to go to school and get into the sciences, I had all these professors who were passionate about science. And they believed it, and it was part of their lives. And they gave me all this useful information. And suddenly that became real to me. But what I was thinking about today was, even when as an atheist, when I was at my angriest, most belligerent points, and I was just looking for some unsuspecting Christian to pounce on and convince them how stupid they were, even when I was at that stage in my life, I had nothing bad to say about my Aunt Diane and my Uncle David. And basically who they were. My Aunt Diane is my dad's oldest sister. And they're Christ followers. And top to bottom. And I recognize that now. I just thought they were weird at the time. But now I probably have more in common with them than I do other people in my family, which is kind of funny. But they were true Christ followers. And you could see it in every aspect of their life. I can remember when they built their house, they did it a little bit at a time because they didn't want to take out any debt. So they didn't want to take out any debt. I can remember family reunions when everybody else would be drinking. They wouldn't drink. And it wasn't that they were just trying to do the church thing and look good in front of other people. Even when we would have discussions as a family and they would say, well, we're having this type of problem or this type of problem, that you have those discussions at family. Timmy got in trouble at school, or somebody lost their job. they would then follow that up with, but this is what we're doing, and the reason we're doing this is because this is what God would want us to do, and this is what Scripture has to say about it. And even when I was at my most angriest points, and I can remember having these conversations with people, I would say, but you know what? I don't have a single bad thing to say about them. I don't agree with their beliefs, but at least I know they're not hypocritical. It's real to them. They live it out. It's real to them. So I didn't have a single bad thing to say about them. So now I find myself 10 years later looking at my own life, and this week kind of looking over and analyzing, okay, where in my life with my current family, I don't have any kids, but I'm married, but where in my life with my current family am I not incorporating God into my relationship with my wife? Or where am I not practicing what I'm preaching? Or where am I, not doing what I should be doing to honor God? So what about you guys? I mean, do you ever find yourself, first of all, when you stop and you think about your family growing up, can you see how they shaped your opinion about God? Can you see how some of the beliefs that you had about God coming out were given to you by your family? And you can see now, when you look at your current family, how much you were shaped by that, how big of a responsibility we have now with our current family. I had the opportunity to go to Catalyst this year up in Atlanta, and I got to hear Chuck Swindoll, which I'd never heard him speak before, but he's been around forever. They were giving him like a Lifetime Achievement Award type thing. And he gave just an amazing talk. I mean, it was one of those talks like from a guy that's been just around since like creation. And he said, it's always hardest, when he was talking about his relationship with God, and he talked from a leadership perspective too, he said it's always hardest at home. And when I look at my life, I think this is true. I think when I go out into the world, I can kind of recognize those little leaks that I have in my boat where I'm taking in water, and I'm real careful when I'm out in the world to plug those leaks up. But when I get home and nobody's looking and it's just my wife there, I'll kind of lay on the couch and take it easy and just let the water pour in and just let it go to the point till the ship almost sinks. So I do. I think it's hardest at home. And it never fails before I come in here on Monday nights or go to encounters on Tuesday night or lead a table at a marriage, a marriage seminar on Wednesday nights. It never fails. I'll do something stupid. Say something stupid to my wife, and then she'll look at me and she'll say, this is what Chuck's talking about, it's hard at home. She'll look at me and say, are you going to go pray with your friends on Monday night with that mouth? Or my last favorite one was, I bet you wouldn't talk to Woody and Steven that way. And I'm kind of a rational guy who likes to have, rational explanations. So the appropriate explanation to me seemed to be, well, that's because Steve and Woody don't nag me and bitch at me all the time like you do. For those of you who are planning on using that response, I would say don't go there. Not the kind of look you're going for there. Didn't do much for it. Didn't honor God, and I found myself about a half an hour later with my tail between my legs apologizing. So don't go there. But I did something really dangerous this week. I sat down with my wife and I said, where do you see in my relationship with you, where do you see me being hypocritical with God? You want to do something scary, sit down with your wife or your significant, somebody who really knows you really well, and ask them that question and give them the freedom to tell you that.